Hey, what's going on, guys? Star Strider here, and we have some news from this morning to go over. If you are like me, you are following the lawsuit that Nintendo filed against Pocketpair, the developers of Pal World, regarding the patent infringement lawsuit in Japan. Now, if for those unaware, Pal World came out in January of last year, 2024. Since then, in the span of that year, Nintendo filed for 3 patents in Japan's patent office, whatever the equivalent is in Japan. Patent 1 was capturing a creature or an enemy and then using it in combat. The second patent was basically revolved around throwing sphere or objects that capture creatures or enemies. So they're basically saying Pocketpair infringed on the Pokeball, long story short. And then the third patent was riding a creature. So it's basically you captured the creature and then you were riding it. Sort of like, how they did in the Let's Go's and Pokemon Legends Arceus, that kind of thing. Now, in Japan's patent law, and first off, I'm not a lawyer. I am just restating things as best as I understand them. As I've read it, and as far as the Japanese laws are concerned. So Nintendo filed these patents in Japan's patent office through the course of early 2024, since after Power World came out. Now, they attached it to parent patents that were dated in 2021, 2022, and by Japanese law, they can do that. They were trying to attach it to earlier patents, and that's how they got around. Oh, how could they patent something after the game had come out? But it's very obvious to many people that Nintendo filed them in response to Power World. So this morning we finally got information on how Pocketpair is defending itself from these patents, at least in Japan. In Japan, now Japan has since filed similar patents in the United States, but most of those have been rejected. U.S. patent laws are different from the patent laws in Japan. So this morning we got news on how Pocketpair is defending itself against the lawsuit in Japan from. Now I'm sourcing this from 2 articles, and I will put links to both articles in the description so you can read it for yourself. So I am going to oversimplify the patents when these patents get basically serial numbers when they are awarded. So JP 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to call this patent 1, 2, and 3. Oversimplification. So patent 1 describes a system for capturing creatures and releasing creatures into battle. Pocketpair argued that none of its elements were new at the time of its filing in 2021, and of course they go on to cite several games that basically challenge the validity of the patent. This is capturing creatures and using them in combat has been game mechanics for decades. If any of you have played World of Warcraft, and I do, my first thought was the hunter class in World of Warcraft. They tame pets to use in combat. In fact, it's a class that is heavily dependent on the pet as part of how the class works.
To illustrate part of my point, guys, here is footage of me on my hunter in World of Warcraft Cataclysm Classic. Here I am taming, just for the sake of the video, I am taming this raptor. Okay, so this is basically a mechanic where this class can capture or tame a creature to be used in combat later on. And here I am switching pets. And of course, this is a class that relies heavily on pets for damage and, tanking mobs away from the player because you're a ranged class. And here I don't know if this counts as combat because I'm using it on really weak little creatures. But as you can see on the fly, I can switch pets. Now in this particular version, this expansion Cataclysm, I can carry up to like 5 pets. The Raptor made 4. And if you're curious, guys, most of my tunes and my hunter pets are named after. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, so most of the names I use are Star Trek references or derivatives. Like my hunter's name Burrell. It's actually Byrell, but I call her Burrell as it's a derivative of the Burrell class bird of prey. And here's the raptor I just tamed. In the Mist of Pandaria expansion, Blizzard introduced a creature capture system for all players, regardless of class. It was for the smaller creatures that you would see in game. So if you saw a rabbit or something in the game, you could actually capture it. You threw little cages at it. Now, here is some footage of me on one of my farming runs in Molten Core and on my hunter. And if you look through the fight, I can actually change pet mid-fight. The reason I'm using this particular fight is the boss that I'm fighting, Ragnaros, he stays where he is. And you can see me changing pet frequently. One of the main reasons I do that habitually on the hunter is this mob that I'm fighting has a knockback, and sometimes he will see, as you saw that turtle, he will put the pet out of my range to heal him. So I switch pets frequently on the fly so I can keep up with heals and maintaining the pet. One other point I would like to add is Palworld allows you to capture more than one creature at a time, which Pokemon has never allowed you to do, players to do. So if you remember, I think back in X and Y and definitely in Alola, there were situations where you would encounter more than one wild Pokemon at the time, and you could not I think they were like, weren't they like, for I can't remember the term, but you would encounter like packs of wild Pokemon at a time, and you could not capture like it would not allow you to capture all of them or pick out one and capture that one as long as the whole pack was alive. Power World lets you do that.
Now, Patent 2 describes a system for aiming and catch a capture item and calculating creature capture chances. This is basically the lack of a better term, the Pokeball mechanic. So as you are aware, if you've played Pokemon, you have Pokeball. You will also have different types of Pokeballs, and they are dependent on an algorithm within the game to calculate whether you catch the Pokemon or not. So a regular Pokeball has this much of a chance. The Great Ball has a greater chance. Quick Ball has a great chance if it's the first thing thrown before a move is used. Every Pokeball type has its own mechanic algorithm on how it determines whether you catch the Pokemon or not. But players can't see the algorithm. Now you can go and find what the mathematical formula is, that's fine. But in game, if you are playing Pokemon, you cannot see the algorithm. In fact, the other day I was playing Pokemon Sword and I was trying to catch the Steelix in the wild area, and geez, that capture seemed to ignore the mechanics. I was using, after about 10 turns, I was using the timer ball, and it didn't seem to make a difference. But in Power World, as you aim the ball at something you're trying to capture, it actually shows on screen what the capture percentage would be. Or if you happen across a pal that is sleeping, and in sleeping, and you get behind it, you get the back bonus or whatever. You actually can see that in game. In Pokemon, you've never been able to see that in game. You may or may not be aware of the mathematical formula that's in the game code, but here's a visual but Power World has a visual representation. And I think that's a big distinction. The third patent mechanic that Nintendo filed for and is also being challenged as far as its validity is writing the creature. Patent 345, this patent, which describes a system for switching writable objects. So this is basically writing the creature. You can catch it, you can write it, and if it's saying about like you can smoothly switch from one mount to another, using World of Warcraft again, look at the mount system. If any of my audience out there is Generation X, can anybody remember riding a bird in Joust? So the idea of riding a creature in a game should not have been patentable anyway. I know I'm oversimplifying it, but that's basically what the third patent is about. And even switching from one mount to another, I don't understand why that patent was ever allowed. So Pocketpair, for all three of these patents, they are challenging the validity of the patents themselves. So as I mentioned, Pocketpair also has a backup argument if the patent infringement or if the patent validity argument fails. They have a backup plan. Plan B is basically they are going to challenge that what their mechanics do not infringe on the patents. And there is another article here. In fact, this was the primary source I went to. This is from GamesFray. They frequently cover legal matters in the gaming industry, and they are closely following this patent. And they go into much more detail, and I will also provide the link to this in the description. Look at this. Even for their defense, they're citing a list of games, including Dragon Quest, by the way, and even their own games, even Nintendo's own games. If the patent survives the validity challenge, Pocketpair still has to argue that it doesn't infringe the patents that Nintendo has, or gained rather. So they've got a couple of arguments this way. This is a lot. It was a lot to read. So, but basically, in a nutshell, they are making arguments demonstrating why their game does not infringe on the patents. So, in a nutshell, guys, we finally know what Pocketpair's defense is in the Nintendo lawsuit. Again, I will put links to these articles in the description of this video, so you guys can go ahead and go and read these for yourselves. This one in particular is a lengthy read and goes into more detail than Game Rant does. Game Rant was basically kind of repackaging and putting things a little bit simpler for the reader. They do cite GameFray for this article as the source. So here's the mother source of the information. So basically, they sent one of their agents into Japanese court, whatever, to get a copy of what Pocketpair filed not too long ago, as far as their defending arguments for Japanese court review, that kind of thing. And this is them kind of going into detail on what those arguments are. Now, don't get me wrong, guys. I've been playing Pokemon for 20 plus years. My first game was Pokemon Red back in the late 90s. 25 plus years now. Uh, I love Pokemon. I love Power World, and I agree with the arguments. They're two different games. They're two different game genres. At the same time, I have thoroughly enjoyed playing Power World, and in my view, they are two different games, vastly different games. And while I enjoy both IPs, I really want to see my hopes is that Nintendo loses this lawsuit, because if they win, it sets a very, very dangerous precedent. So let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. And again, I will put a link to these articles in the description. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you guys next time.